vanilla, cedar, coconut, clove, smoke. We describe them as flavors in wine, but sometimes they did not begin in the grape at all. They began here, inside an oak tree that may have been growing for a century or more before anyone planted the vineyard whose wine would eventually fill its barrel. You really can taste a tree. The question is, how?
A barrel is not just a container, it is an ingredient, and its recipe begins in a forest. Oak changes wine in three broad ways. It releases flavor and tannin from the wood. It emits tiny amounts of oxygen during maturation, and it becomes a slow reaction vessel where wine, wood, oxygen, and time interact. That is why a barrel and a handful of oak chips are not chemically identical.
Inside the wood is an entire spice rack. Oak lactones can suggest coconut and fresh-cut wood. Vanillin brings vanilla. Eugenol can read as clove. Guaiacol and related compounds can feel smoky or toasted. Heat creates furfural compounds associated with toast, caramel, and almond-like impressions. None of these are artificial flavorings. They come from the wood itself and from what seasoning and fire do to it.
Oak also contains ellagic tannins. They can affect a wine's astringency, structure, color chemistry, and aging behavior. Meanwhile, a barrel slowly exchanges oxygen with the outside world. That gentle exposure can encourage tannins to join into larger molecules, soften texture, and help stabilize color. The barrel is doing three jobs at once: flavor source, tannin source, and reaction vessel.
Now for the comparison everyone knows: French oak versus American oak. French barrel makers commonly use sessile oak, Quercus petrea, and pedunculate oak, Quercus robur. American barrels are primarily Quercus alba, American white oak. In broad tasting terms, French oak is often described as restrained and structural, with spice, cedar, and subtle vanilla. American oak often announces itself more clearly with vanilla, coconut, and sweet spice.
But country is only the first line of the recipe. French oak may come from forests associated with Aelie, Tronçais, Nièvre, or the Vosges. American oak may come from Missouri, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, or Ohio. Researchers have measured differences not only between species, but among American oaks from different states. There is no single French oak flavor, and there is no single American oak flavor.
Rioja is a wonderful place to train your senses. Traditional examples often reveal that recognizable American oak family of vanilla, coconut, and sweet spice. Have you noticed that signature in a Rioja, a Cabernet, or something else? Tell us the wine in the comments. I want to know where you first realized that some of a wine's aroma was coming from the barrel.
American oak is often less expensive, but that does not mean it is inferior. The anatomy of the tree changes the economics. American white oak has abundant Ty low Cs, structures that help block its vessels, so cooperage wood can often be sawn efficiently and still hold liquid. French oak is traditionally split along the grain. The simple result: a cooper can often get much more usable barrel wood from an American oak log.
And the world of oak is much larger than two countries. Hungarian oak often uses the same species found in France, a reminder that geography matters even when species does not change. Slavonian oak is historically important in Barolo, Barbaresco, and Brunello, frequently as enormous casks called botti. Spanish oak, including Quercus pyrenaica, has also shown a distinctive chemical profile. Oak is a world, not a duel.
We accept that soil, rainfall, climate, and elevation change grapes. Why would they not change trees? Slow growth, water, temperature, and forest conditions shape the wood's rings and chemistry. Barrel makers increasingly study what we might call forest terroir, soil to tree, to stave, to barrel, to wine. It is not a claim that every forest has one fixed flavor. It is a recognition that origin can leave measurable differences.
Then comes grain, the characteristic most wine drinkers never hear about. Look at a cross-section of oak. Tight rings, wider rings, differences in growth. Coopers classify wood as extra fine, fine, medium, or coarse grain. Grain affects the structure of the stave and the pace of extraction. A winemaker may not simply order French oak. They may order fine-grain French oak because they want a particular conversation between wood and wine.
My favorite part happens before there is a barrel at all. Someone has to decide which trees are worthy of becoming one. Experienced oak buyers examine the trunk's straightness, knots, usable heartwood, growth rings, species and provenance. A great cooper almost seems to know the secret language of trees, looking at grain and structure, imagining what that wood might eventually do to a wine that does not yet exist.
The chosen wood is split or sawn into staves. Then, instead of rushing indoors, it may be left outside for 2 or 3 years, sometimes longer. Rain, sun, wind, microorganisms, and changing seasons do more than dry it. Natural seasoning can leach harsher compounds and transform the wood's aromatic potential. Premium coopers may specify 24, 36, or even 60 months of outdoor seasoning.
Think about that chain of time, perhaps 150 years of tree growth, 3 years of staves seasoning outdoors, 18 months of wine in barrel, then years or decades in bottle. A glass of wine can be the final link in decisions spread across generations. Someone selected a tree long before the winemaker knew what that vintage would taste like.
Then the cooper sets it on fire. Heat makes the staves flexible enough to bend, and controlled toasting transforms the barrel's interior. A lighter toast can preserve fresher wood and spice notes. Medium toast may emphasize vanilla, toast, and caramel. Heavier regimes can push toward smoke, roast, and coffee. But those are tendencies, not a flavor chart. Temperature, time, wood, and barrel-making technique all interact.
The same tree can therefore make very different barrels, and the first wine placed into a new barrel meets the largest reservoir of extractable compounds. The second fill gives less. By the third or fourth use, the barrel may be largely neutral. Neutral does not mean useless. It means little new oak flavor. The vessel can still provide slow oxygen exposure, evaporation, lees interaction, and maturation.
That explains a phrase like aged in 40% new French oak. Imagine 10 barrels. 4 are new, 6 have already held wine. Blend them together, and the winemaker gets oak influence without putting every drop into brand new wood. In a real cellar, the recipe may combine several barrel makers, forests, toast levels, barrel ages, and sizes. Oak is something winemakers blend just as deliberately as wine.
Size matters too. A 225-liter Bordeaux barrique exposes more wine to wood than an enormous traditional cask holding thousands of liters. That helps explain how Barolo can spend years in a giant Slavonian botti without tasting like vanilla extract. And if fermentation happens inside the barrel, especially with Chardonnay, yeast, lees, and malolactic fermentation can integrate the oak differently than simple barrel aging.
Ordering a barrel can be like commissioning a bespoke instrument. Country, forest, species, grain, seasoning, volume, toast, even whether the barrel heads are toasted. If you could choose one experiment, what would you compare side by side? French versus American oak, new versus neutral, or small barrel versus giant cask? Put your choice in the comments. That is the tasting test I would most like to see us make.
So the next time someone says a wine spent 18 months in French oak, you know how much that sentence leaves out. Which forest, which species, Which grain? How long was the wood seasoned? How was it toasted? Was the barrel new? How large was it? And who was the cooper? A barrel is not packaging. It is an entire second terroir layered onto the wine.
Wine may begin in the vineyard, but sometimes part of its flavor began growing in a forest a century before the grapes ever existed. If this changed how you think about oak, subscribe, choose the next story on screen, and tell us which barrel experiment you want us to taste.